Music is deeply set in every culture in the world, making it a powerful force connecting people without the need for language. It is so ubiquitous that we can practically find it everywhere we go, from going to the supermarket to going to a bar to watching Netflix at home. It is always there, even if sometimes we do not notice it. However, music is not just entertainment, and it also has many positive effects on the human body, especially the brain. It can regulate our brain chemistry, brain function, and mood. I find this fascinating as music forms a big chunk of my life. And in fact, today I will highlight 5 ways how music affects the brain and how we can use this force to our advantage. Additionally, one of the points is also microglia approved. Hi there, I'm Yvette and this is the Curious Maltese channel. I'm a neuroscientist and similar to today, I like to talk about interesting brain research topics and how they can be applied to our lives. In order for me to make this video, I read through many scientific research papers and finally I selected a few, the ones that I thought, in my opinion, were the most interesting. If by any chance you would like to read my selection more in depth, I will be providing the links to the studies in the video description. If you are new to reading scientific literature, I would recommend that you would start with reading the reviews, as these give a good overview of the field in question, and then, if need be, continue on with the individual studies. And so, to guide you, I will indicate the type of research article next to the link. And with this, let's go. Music is a reward. Music can tap into the reward and motivation system of the brain, producing feelings of pleasure and enjoyment. Well, we are all familiar with the feeling of chills a special song can give us. So to describe this process more neuroscientifically, music particularly activates the mesocortical limbic pathway of the brain, which engages different parts of the brain, such as the ventral tegmental area and the midbrain, nucleus accumbens, the hippocampus, and also parts of the cortex. And when this pathway is activated, dopamine is released. This is the same neurochemical release when we do something that we enjoy, such as food, sex, drugs, and watching my videos, of course. So think about it, we can use music to make something we don't like enjoyable. As we all know, the more enjoyable something is, the more likely we are to repeat it. On this point, a study in 2021 showed that when scientists submitted gym goers to music matching their physical exertion in their gym routine, the gym goers reported more satisfaction. Music as an anti-distraction tool. So here we enter a controversial area in this field, as there are studies with conflicting results. Well, there are studies like this one which describe music as a distraction. However, then there are studies like this one whereby they describe music as a focusing tool. The idea that music is a distraction stems from the fact that when we are listening to music while we're doing something else, the brain is occupied in doing two things. And since the brain's cognitive resources are limited, giving your brain something other than one thing to process can decrease your output. So from my literature research, I found that whether music is a distraction or not, all depends on the type of music being played and the task at hand. For example, if the task is repetitive, it has been shown that the output is increased when listening to music. In fact, in a study in 1972, it demonstrated that the participants doing the repetitive task while listening to music performed 7.4% better than the ones who didn't listen to the music. Nevertheless, worry not, we can still use music while we are doing cognitively demanding tasks. However, we have to watch out what sort of music we have on our playlist. It was reported that fast and loud music is distracting, especially when it has lyrics. When looking at the data of this study, indicates that for certain cognitive tasks, music listeners performed worse than those who were sitting in silence. However, better than the ones which had like background noise. So with this, let's be honest, how many of us have the luxury to work in silence? I have to admit that there is always some distracting background noise in my surroundings, so I can see why music is a nice addition to help me focus. In fact, listening to music in not so silent spaces, such as a shared office for example, is a great way to eliminate distractions. Music can improve our performance in cognitive tasks. This has been dubbed as the Mozart effect, where the study participants scored better in spatio-temporal tests while listening to a Mozart musical piece. However, the results of the study have been blown out of proportion in the 90s, where, for example, a US politician had proposed to give a compact disc with Mozart sonata to new mothers so that they can play this CD to their newborn babies and raise their intellect. So no, you won't end up with a huge brain if you listen to Mozart 24/7. To point out, the results mentioned in the original study are only temporary, and rather than increasing intelligence by listening to music, it rather shows that music can be used as a tool to sharpen our abilities. Different types of music are able to elicit different responses from our brains. So, by using music to our advantage, we are able to manipulate our brains to be more receptive to certain tasks. Music reduces stress. Listening to relaxing music, that is, a slow tempo, low pitch, and no lyrics, has been shown to reduce stress and anxiety. Music manages to achieve this in two ways. So, the first reason is because music tempo affects the brainstem. In the study, it was shown that brainstem neurons fire synchronously with the music tempo. Since the functions of the brainstem are associated with subconscious activities such as breathing and heart rate, it was reported that listening to relaxing music decreases the heart rate, pulse, and also blood pressure. So now, the second way how music can reduce stress is by interfering with the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA for short, which is usually activated when we are stressed. An important molecule associated with this axis is called cortisol, which is a hormone released by the adrenals, and its production is increased when we are stressed, as this molecule prepares us for the fight or flight response. Therefore, measuring cortisol levels is usually a good indicator of the stress levels. For example, in this study, scientists have monitored the cortisol levels of participants after being exposed to a stressor. The participants of the experiment were asked to give a talk in front of an audience, which is the stressor, mind you, and they monitored their cortisol levels before and after the talk. And they noticed that after the talk, the group of participants who listened to music had their cortisol levels decrease quite rapidly when compared to the group of participants who just sat in silence. So if you had one of those days and you can't seem to switch off your brain, you can just remember to listen to a calm musical piece, as this can guide your brain to become more relaxed and less stressed. Music helps immunity. So music influences immunity. When I started to research for this video, this point was the one that most took me by surprise. And just as promised, this point is also microglia approved. And you'll see why just soon enough. So before we get into the research, I wanted to point out an interesting concept in immunity, and one which is very, very important in disease, and sometimes it's a little bit counterintuitive. So, in order for our body to fight off disease, be it a bacterium or a misfolded protein, our immune system needs to react and neutralize the threat. And this whole process is called inflammation. Acute inflammation, acute meaning in the short term, is usually beneficial, and actually it is necessary for our body to bring us back to health. However, if inflammation turns chronic, chronic meaning in the long term, then inflammation is considered bad. In fact, many diseases are caused or worsened by chronic inflammation, and such diseases are like arthritis, atherosclerosis, and also Alzheimer's disease. So, when we're talking about inflammation and inflammatory molecules, it's good to distinguish between acute and chronic, as they are total opposites. So, back to music and immunity. So, it has been shown that passive listening to relaxing music decreases the amounts of a pro-inflammatory molecule called IL-6 in critically ill patients. And in another study, music listening was associated with an increase in salivary IgA. Salivary IgA is considered as a marker of functionality of the mucosal immune system. So, taking the outcomes of these two studies together, it seems that listening to music boosts the immune defenses, at least in the periphery. However, this phenomenon is also seen in the brain. And to deliver this part of the video, we get Roger. So Roger here is a microglial cell. And microglia are the innate immune cells of the brain. They are constantly surveilling the brain and checking whether if there is anything weird. And if there is, they just chuck it out. They are pretty cool cells. And in the past decade or two, they have risen to the forefront of neuroscience, especially in understanding brain diseases. So usually when we are talking about brain immunity, most scientists are referring to microglia. cells like Roger here. So to make this connection now with music. So if you remember from point number 4, this study over here showed that neurons fire synchronously with music tempo. And well, to add to this point, it was shown that microglia respond differently when the frequency of neurons is changed. And interestingly, in the study, scientists exposed a mouse model for the A-beta pathology in Alzheimer's to a 40 Hz auditory stimulus, or let's say music in the 40 Hz region, and reported a reduction in A-beta plaques in the brain areas which are stimulated by music, namely the auditory cortex and also the hippocampus. And this reduction in A-beta plaques was attributed to a heightened microglia response. Cool, huh? So think of it like this. It seems that music not only lifts our mood, but also tries to lift us up in general. So this brings me to the end. If you like this video, you might like this video over here, which is on neuronal transplantation, a research field with a neuron-centered regenerative approach aimed at replenishing brains after disease or injury. So with this, Roger and I would like to thank you for watching, and until next time, see ya!